The following is a fictional inaugural address. It could never happen in America the way that it exists today. It takes place on the morning of January 20th, 2017. For the first time in American history, church bells have been ringing nationwide in joyous celebration of a presidential inauguration. They began ringing in the early morning and continued right up to the moment of the new president's inaugural address. All of this came about as a result of the 2014 elections, when once again the Democrat side of the party experienced a resounding national victory in the congressional elections of that year. A great many of those elections, highly questionable, based on all of the polls conducted by all of the professional polling organizations in America prior to those elections, as well as hundreds of complaints nationwide by voters of more and more openly committed voter fraud. But again, and just as it was in the 2012 elections, the Republican side of the party refused to contest any of those questionable victories. It was at that point that millions of the citizens in America finally became outraged, to the point that they realized there was no real difference between either the Democrat side or the Republican side of the party that had dominated America for more than a century and a half. It finally became all too obvious to ignore that what was once two separate political parties was now actually one party, owned and controlled by the same group of people who in reality were the real power in America's government. And Americans themselves no longer had any real say in the function of their own government and the direction it was taking their country. They now realized that if they wanted to continue to live in the greatest and freest nation ever conceived, that they would need to join together in a rebellion to attempt to preserve the nation. And they did. But it was not a violent rebellion, like the one that formed the American nation, but rather a civil rebellion that took place in large and small cities nationwide, and at the capitals of most of the individual states. Their demand was universal and simple. Their demand was that this nation totally eliminate the use of those easily manipulated electronic vote tabulation machines and return to the use of paper ballots. Ballots that were counted and verified by 3 people for each ballot cast, and that the physical tabulation of those votes be handled strictly by Americans and in America. Many were determined enough in their demand that they actually camped out at state capitals. They finally won, as states gave in one by one and returned to the original voting system. But the people did not stop there. Their anger had been fueled to the point where they totally ignored the naysayers and the defeatists, and by the millions, they disassociated themselves from both the Democrats and the Republicans. And following the example set by Ross Perot in 1992, they created a new political party, a pro-constitution and financially responsible party that they themselves would be able to control. A party free from the control of corrupt special interests. They had something going for them that Ross Perot never did, and that was the power of the internet, which they used effectively and relentlessly. The result was the people of America finally taking control of not only the executive branch of government, but likewise taking control of many of the seats in Congress as well. More than enough to halt the destructive agenda of the Democrats and Republicans, and with an extreme optimism that they would take control of even more of those congressional seats in 2018, as the nation would come to realize that America was finally regaining its freedom. And all of this was accomplished in just 2 years. As you watch and listen to this inaugural address, you will notice that you do not see the actual face of the new president, because this new president, elected by and for the people, is one of the regular citizens of this nation. This new president is actually all of the true patriotic citizens of this nation expressing their desires. Yes, this is only a fictional inaugural address by a fictional new president. It is only what those Americans still loyal to the Constitution of the United States and the ideals that America was founded on and for would like to hear. It could never happen in America the way that it exists today. Or could it?
My fellow Americans, this is not only a very special day, it's a very historic day for you, the people of this great nation. You have achieved a massive goal, and you have achieved it in a record amount of time. This accomplishment of yours is a true testament to the will of the American people. With this past election, you proved the naysayers and the defeatists wrong. After your successful nationwide drive to force the return to verifiable and individually counted and confirmed paper ballots for this latest national election, and after 2 ballot recounts demanded by both the Democrats and the Republicans, all coming up with the same results, it was your will, your choice that prevailed. Not just for this particular office that I am so very honored to hold for you, the people of this nation, but also to have your will and your choices prevail as well for all the congressional seats that you have finally regained. So, beginning today, and in accordance with the actual wishes of you, the truly patriotic citizens of this nation, the arrogance of elected public officials, the self-centeredness of elected public officials, as well as the seemingly outright unintelligent decisions and destructive actions of the past several decades of America's government comes to an end. Beginning today, America will finally be restored, not only economically, but will regain the respect it has been stripped of, not only over the past half-century, but especially over the past 8 years. Beginning today, the decades-long systematic Marxist progressive takeover of America has been halted. And if your voice continues to prevail in future elections, it may actually be said that it has now come to an end. Beginning today, the government of the United States of America has been returned to the people, and once again will be a government of, by, and for the people. The Constitution of the United States of America will be officially restored, and from this day forward actually adhered to. From this day forward, it will remain intact and free from the attacks by those who for so long have wanted it to be abolished and have tried repeatedly to actually abolish it. Beginning today, America will no longer involve itself in meaningless and seemingly endless wars like it has for the past several decades, costing America the lives of so many thousands of its youth, as well as career military personnel, for what has always amounted to be for nothing. From this day forward, should America become involved in any major military conflict, it should only be to defend this nation and its people. And if other countries ask for America's military help, that help will only come if first approved by the Congress of the United States, and then will primarily be composed of those in our military who actually volunteer to lend their military skills to help another country. This country will no longer engage in any politically correct rules for military engagement. If our military is to be involved, then our military will be involved to win. In addition to that, the military of the United States was never meant to be subject to the political whims and agendas of America's politicians. Because back when this nation was formed, our founders knew there would be some political agendas that strove for the destruction of the United States. Therefore, they set the military apart from the rest of this nation, and it was not to be subjected to political whims and agendas. From this point forward, there will be no political agendas and no political whims inflicted upon our military. In fact, as of today, all politically motivated, agenda-driven policies inflicted upon our military over the past several decades will be repealed. All brave American soldiers that were arrested and incarcerated unjustly for doing nothing more than what they were trained to do, but whose actions did not fall in line with the politically motivated ideas of the agenda-driven politicians in this country, will be released from their incarceration and their so-called criminal records expunged. Although America is only one of many countries on this planet, it was and will again be the greatest country on this planet. Once again, the shining beacon for all the world to see. Although it is a member of this world, America was and will again become a sovereign country, and not the property of the rest of the world, where anyone who wants to can just come here at will. There used to be, and once again will be, rules for immigration to this country. We have borders. Those borders will be protected. We have our own language, which is the Americanized English language. The Americanized English language will finally be made the permanent official language of this nation. America has a culture unique among the world. The American culture will prevail. America is in severe economic turmoil, and it was placed in that turmoil deliberately. Beginning now, that turmoil, that economic mess, will begin to be reversed. America possesses more natural resources beneath it than the rest of the entire world combined. Beginning now, we are going to take full advantage of all that we possess. This nation will no longer be forced to acquire its energy from other nations. Although we also are an exporting nation of natural resources, the same as other countries, we will now institute the requirement that at the very least half of what is acquired will be held for use by the American people, thus drastically reducing the cost of those resources to the American public. Should that amount cause to be too much of a holdback, then it may be adjusted accordingly, but usage for Americans will be the priority. This act alone will begin to spur the economy drastically toward its economic recovery. So-called green energy projects will still be explored, but they will be explored by the private sector only. So far, those projects have proven to have minimal at best efficiency and have only been used for massive siphoning off of taxpayer dollars with no beneficial results. Green energy projects can only be regarded as sideline ventures, and those ventures must be undertaken strictly by the private sector. Any loans given to private sector green energy projects must and will be secured 100% with collateral. The American taxpayers have been ripped off for too long and for too much. This has now ended. This action alone will save the American taxpayers hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars. Next, those who wanted to destroy this nation economically were far too free with the amount of American tax dollars that they would just give away. Beginning now, all federal funding of welfare programs will have the absolute restriction that those funds can only be given to legal American citizens. This nation already contributes enough American taxpayer dollars to other countries through foreign aid. We do not need to expend foreign aid dollars on American soil. This act alone will save the taxpayers around $300 billion or more each and every year. Furthermore, employment in this nation will be given first to American citizens, followed by those who are legally in this country. Next, the Federal Reserve was founded by an unscrupulous group of bankers and passed by Congress during a congressional break back in the early 1900s, when only those politicians that were in accordance with this group's political agenda remained present to vote on its establishment. It's a private organization that is allowed to manipulate the American economy by printing the currency that America uses, and then actually lends this nation that currency at a rate of interest that they determine. And the interest payments received by them are acquired by them taxation-free. Because this nation now relies upon that currency as its own, the Federal Reserve will not be abolished. And being that this is America, that private organization will not be nationalized. However, beginning with this administration, that organization will now be taxed on the profits they make. This action alone will not only save the American taxpayers, both businesses and individuals alike, literally hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars each and every year. That action may make it very possible to drastically lower the taxes for each and every working American. Next, many government agencies were created over the past several decades under the guise of being helpful to the American people and the planet in general. But in reality, those agencies were created to put ever-increasing regulation strangleholds upon American businesses that employ the citizens of this nation. Regulations that raise the cost for what businesses produce and market, and likewise cause them to reduce the numbers of Americans they employ. All of this was by design. Therefore, although not going to be abolished completely, the EPA is going to be drastically downsized to no more than a fraction of the size that it is today. All Americans want clean air and water, and we will make sure that Americans have clean air and water. But we do not need thousands upon thousands of economy-strangling, business-killing regulations to make sure that we have clean air and water, when only a few simple regulations will suffice. Therefore, the number of EPA agents will be drastically downsized to only a handful of agents assigned to the smaller states, and only a few dozen or so per state for the larger states. Those thousands upon thousands of deliberate economy-killing regulations will be suspended and replaced by only a few highly enforced regulations. With the removal of this stranglehold on American businesses, this act alone will allow American businesses to once again hire people because Americans actually do want to work and feel the pride of being productive and self-sustaining. Next, the Department of Homeland Security was created using the events of 9/11/01 as the excuse for its creation. There is absolutely no need for a massive national military-style police force because this nation is now going to move completely away from becoming the Marxist totalitarian police state that has steadily been under construction for more than a decade now. Each individual state has its own police departments and sheriff's departments. And each state has its own National Guard that is under the direct control of the individual governors of each state. That control will remain under the jurisdiction of each state's governor. The Department of Homeland Security will be abolished, saving the American taxpayers literally billions of dollars each and every year. Fellow Americans, there has been only one time in this nation's history that this nation operated free of debt. That was during the administration of Andrew Jackson. President Jackson paid off this nation's debt, and this nation worked debt-free for the rest of his administration. We are now trillions of dollars in debt, with our national debt doubling over just the last 8 years. We are now close to being completely financially bankrupt. And we have reached this point by the deliberate actions of those who wanted this nation to economically collapse. With the coming changes that will be instituted by the end of this administration, this nation will either be once again debt-free and operating on a financial surplus, or very close to achieving that goal. education in this nation has been yet another planned disaster. Therefore, to give our youth a fair chance at life, the overseeing of education, and the decision as to the educational curriculum will now be returned to where it never should have been removed from to begin with, and that is the state level, with the only federal involvement being financial. And that financial involvement from the federal government will have no restrictions attached to it, other than that the funds received must be used solely for education in reading, writing skills, and mathematical skills, and actual science. The forcing of the socialist agenda on entire generations of America's youth has now come to an end. Education should, and once again will be, for the sole purpose of preparing America's youth to compete in the highly technical world that we have become. The primary reason for the ever-increasing dropout rate of America's youth is because they realized that they were not receiving any education that could actually benefit them in life. Instead, they were being fed an ever-increasing amount of socialism designed to indoctrinate them to the idea that the state will take care of them for their entire lives. At one time, America produced students that were prepared to compete in life. It will now return to that, and America's youth will once again be prepared to compete in the world as it is, not only today, but as it will be in the future. Just as in the business realm, competition is a good thing for youth of this nation. Scholastic competition will help our youth to once again learn to succeed in life. Scholastic competition among schools in each state, as well as interstate competition, will once again produce future leaders in both the private and public sectors. Where colleges and universities are concerned, those colleges and universities that abolish the ROTC programs on their campuses will only be allowed to continue to receive federal funding if they once again reinstate all the ROTC programs that they abolished because of their own leftist political agenda. Our military is always in need of degreed officers, and if a student voluntarily chooses the American military as his first or maybe even his sole direction in life, and wishes to enter our military through the ROTC program, then he will once again be allowed that opportunity. And furthermore, where our military veterans are concerned, this nation owes each and every veteran who served honorably and who placed their lives on the line for this nation a never-ending debt of gratitude. Those veterans who are disabled as a result of their service to this nation must never again be used as political bargaining chips by the politicians in this country, most of whom have never served this nation in that capacity. Therefore, I am requesting that Congress prepare a military veterans bill that will guarantee that never again will disability payments that so many of these veterans rely upon be in jeopardy. For far too long now, leftist politicians have used threats to cut the funding for veterans, as well as Americans elderly, for their own political gain. This ends now. Next, the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America prohibits this government from promoting any singular religion. For decades, the Christian religion has been under continuous attack in the court systems of this nation. And in almost every case, the decisions of those courts has been against the Christian religion and in favor of the religion of atheism. This administration will not institute any action to reverse those decisions because by law it cannot interfere. It is up to you, the people, to reinstitute those cases if you want them once again heard. However, for the past 8 years, the executive branch of this government has tried to force its will and the business of government upon the Christian religion, and only upon the Christian religion, while at the same time, and in direct violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution, has used the government of this nation to actually endorse the political theocracy of Islam. This ends now. This government will no longer be involved in the promoting of religion. Next, the judicial system in America has for a very long time been abused, with judges basing their decisions more upon political cronyism or their personal political ideology than upon upholding the laws that were duly established. Many of them have personally overruled laws that were duly passed by the legislatures of the individual states and even Congress itself. And many more have actually legislated from the bench and remained unchallenged in their personal legislation. Judges were placed in their respective positions to make sure that established laws were adhered to. They were not placed in those positions to create their own laws, nor overturn duly created laws based on their own personal belief. This practice will now come to an end, with impeachment proceedings drawn for each federal judge who violated his oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and to fairly administer over duly established laws. And Congress will be asked to overturn any such laws established by these individual judges on their own. This nation has had a problem with the transparency of government almost since its very creation. All previous administrations were all too secretive in their affairs. This last administration even more so than all the others. That has now come to an end as well. Lobbyists have set the tone in Washington for generations. From this point forward, lobbyists will be required to put everything they are hired to lobby for online, with no exceptions. Not only will they be required to post what they are seeking, but from whom they are seeking it as well. We are now going to make it possible for all Americans to see firsthand what they have never been allowed to see before. Earmarks have been another problem with Congress. Politicians in Congress have been allowed to take hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars out of the Treasury at will, just by tacking their requests onto any bill that passes in Congress. And the Treasury just sends out the checks. From now on, any and all federal grant requests will likewise be required to be posted online and up front, so the taxpayers of this nation will not only be able to see who wants the taxpayers' money, but as well as for what they want it. The taxpayers of this nation will also be able to see just who is planning on giving away the taxpayers' money. If the taxpayers object to their giving away of the taxpayers' money, they will be able to register their objections online as well. And finally, the Special Executive Orders Act granted to President Roosevelt by the Congress of the United States and never relinquished by any president since that time has been overly and maliciously abused over the past several decades, but even more so over the past 8 years. That same act will initially be used to undo much of the damage that was inflicted upon this nation as a means to repeal most of those actions. Then, at the end of this administration, the Special Executive Powers Act will be returned to Congress, where, with the exception of national emergencies and ceremonial events, all such executive actions will from then on require the approval of Congress. Like all branches of government in this nation, the office of the President belongs to the people. The office of President does not make one a ruler who can issue edicts at will over the people. We are now embarking on not a rebuilding of America, but rather a return to the Constitution this nation was founded upon, and a return to what this nation's founders intended this nation to be from the very beginning more than 2 centuries ago. May God once again be on our side.
Yes, this is only a fictional inaugural address by a fictional new president. It could never happen in America the way that it exists today. Or could it?